Hello and welcome to It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Joining me today is Michael Holden, who is Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist with the Business Council of Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about the labor force surveys data released by Statistics Canada. Want to talk a little bit about Alberta, a little bit of Calgary, and then maybe a national. So let's start with Calgary first of all. The numbers show jobs were down by 1,000 in December compared to November. Year over year, we're looking at a loss of 13,300 positions, and the unemployment rate kind of just went down slightly from 10.7% to 10.4%. What are those numbers showing you for the Calgary region right now, Michael?
Well, I think what they're showing is in part what we're seeing across the country, which is a sort of a long, slow recovery that's going to have some ups and downs and bumps in it. And in the case of Calgary, those trends which we see across the country are compounded by the fact that we're seeing some very specific economic challenges here, whether they relate largely to the oil and gas sector and some of the consolidations and layoffs that we've been seeing in the fall and into the winter. And that's, I think, the main cause of the numbers that we're seeing in Calgary right now.
Okay, quick look at the Alberta numbers. 11,900 jobs lost month over month. From a year ago, employment is down 132,700, and the unemployment number actually fell to 11.0% from 11.1% the previous month. Any differences in Alberta compared to what's happening in the Calgary region?
No, I think it's largely some of the same factors. I think one of the other ones that is common to the entire province, of course, is the impact of the economic shutdown that we saw in December. Now, most of that shutdown is not reflected in these numbers yet. What we're seeing there is the impact of the first stage, that kind of soft shutdown that we had at the beginning of December. And you see that reflected in the industries that had been most affected jobs-wise. So we saw a significant decline in employment in hospitality industries, accommodation, food services, and some of these culture and recreation jobs, as well as construction. So those three areas accounted for the entire drop in Alberta. And I think outside of those, we saw actually some significant job increases. And so that's what's driving this. So it's in a sense, it's not really a secret or not really a surprise. Unfortunately, though, this does not reflect the later stage impact because the labor force survey comes out in that third week of December, and that is exactly when the most recent shutdown occurred. So I think that we're going to see some even worse numbers once the January figures come in.
Okay, and just let's take a quick look at national numbers. Employment down 62,600. From a year ago, it's down 571,600. And the employment rate nationally rose to 8.6% from 8.5% the previous month. First decline, apparently, monthly decline in employment in Canada since April. Thoughts on that?
Well, again, this is related to some of the shutdown events that we're seeing in certain provinces. So the ones that were the hardest hit were provinces like Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and the impacts that we saw, or the shutdown rather, in Ontario, which took place in earnest on Boxing Day, is again, as with Alberta, not reflected in there. So we saw some softness in central Canada, harsher realities on the prairies and in pockets of Atlantic Canada. BC made out pretty well last month. I think that because of the second wave that's hitting most parts of the country and some of the additional stringencies that governments are putting in place in those areas, we're going to start to see this. It's not an unexpected result, and I think that we're going to see more of that in the months ahead.
Okay. And Michael, one last question, and you did allude to it before about the numbers are going to be worse in January. That's everything that I've read today as well from the commentaries from a lot of chief economists and some of the big banks. How bad is it going to get? And how long is this going to be prolonged? Does it all depend on how long the lockdowns remain?
Largely, yes. I think that, first of all, it's not going to be as bad as it was in March or in April of last year. I mean, we're not going to see that kind of return to those levels. It's going to be, it's going to look bad compared to December, maybe like returning to the levels that we were at roughly in the summer or so, or in May, June of last year. And I think that this is, if this most recent round of lockdowns and shutdowns manages to bend the curve downward, this could be the beginning of the end. We'll start to see a more permanent recovery after that. So I think that this is, I'd say this is one final hurdle and one final significantly negative point. And then from that point forward, any recovery that we do see, and there will be a bit of a snapback again right away in the months following these, or once these restrictions are lifted. And at that point, we'll start to see steadier increases and a return to more normal activity.
Okay, super. Thanks for joining us today, Michael.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, that was Michael Holden, who is the Vice President of Policy and Chief Economist for the Business Council of Alberta. This has been It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Thanks for joining us today.